basically the story was that NBC wanted me to do a post-game show. And I said, okay, sure, but I don't watch much football on Sunday. I'm getting ready for my game. And they go, it's no big deal. You can just make it up. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I just make up stuff. They're going to pay me more money. Yeah, what the heck? I'll just fake it. And I said, well, surely somebody online has some recap of what happened during the day so I can read the articles and sort of fake my way through it. Yeah, I've got the television on while I'm studying, but I'm still getting ready for Sunday night on Sunday afternoon. And so I started going through, I found Pro Football Focus, and I'm looking at this stuff and I go, hey, this is pretty good. I don't know who this is, but then you could pay $26.99. I'll never forget that number, $26.99. And you could, so I put in my credit card and it allowed you to go to some back page and more information and more detail. And I had just done several of these teams, during the course of the season. So I really knew them. I knew what I thought of the players. I knew what the coaches thought of the players. And I had actually watched them play in multiple games, getting ready for those games. And so I'm like, wow, this stuff is really pretty good. I mean, they've got this pretty much nailed. And so I type in the contact us at the top right-hand corner of the screen, which no ordinary human being ever types anything in contact us, but I did. And I go, hey, this is Cris Collinsworth. Love your stuff. Who are you guys? Just assuming it was a bunch of former players or coaches or whatever. And I put my telephone number in there. I'm going to say a maximum of 5 minutes, probably more like 3 minutes. I get a call from this guy who I'm looking at right now with a British accent, and he starts, and I can't do British accents, so I won't do it injustice there. But he says, oh, and Neil Hornsby, and and I go, all I'm thinking is, I swear to you, all I'm thinking, as soon as I heard the British accent, is son of a bitch. This Brit just hustled me out of $26.99. I was so mad. I couldn't stand it. All I'm thinking about is how am I going to get my money back? Well, welcome into the Cris Collinsworth podcast. I have a special one for you here today. We always have a lot of great football guests on, but today I've got my business partner and my buddy, Neil Hornsby, from whom I bought PFF, or at least the majority share of PFF. And today we're going to tell the story of Pro Football Focus and how it came to be. You will not believe this story of a guy from England who basically started a little online club that turned into one of the biggest, most powerful football businesses in all the land. It's an amazing, amazing story, and he tells it great. So we're going to get into that in just a minute. But before we get there, I've got to remind you about all these awesome products at PFF. It's already fantasy football season, and you may remember that we were offering a little 40% off sale the past few weeks. Well, that sale ended yesterday, so I apologize for that. But because I do own the majority share of this company, I get a chance to do something special. So if you sneak in the promo code SAVE40, just give it a shot. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that sale exists, at least for you guys, because I'm a little late getting to this podcast this week. So it's I'm breaking the rules. But anyway, you're going to get access to PFF's Fantasy Football Draft Guide, complete with our player rankings and projections, College Football Preview Magazine, first edition of the 2022 NFL Draft Guide. That's right. Next year's draft guide is already out. And all of PFF's locked article content. This will open that door for you. Again, that's promo code SAVE40 for 40% off any PFF subscription. Get access to all of PFF's fantasy tools for $5.99. Tell them I sent you, and we're going to break the rules a little bit. So here we go with my buddy, Neil Hornsby, the founder, the original, the godfather of PFF, Neil Hornsby, right now. All right, well, here we go. This is a show I have been waiting to do for a little while. I just have to find the right timing. and we are in the right timing right now. I've got my partner, my friend, my crazy cohort that we how would you say it, Neil? We just kind of talk through everything that there is to do with PFF. But this is the guy who is the founder, the originator, the guy who came up with the idea for Pro Football Focus that I somehow stumbled across 6 years ago and became a part of. But Pro Football Focus was started by Neil Hornsby in England, and somehow he took over the football world. And we are going to spend a little bit of time unearthing exactly how that happened as he sits in what at one time was my chair in the studio, but now he's taken that over too, which is good. How are you, man? What's going on?
I am absolutely fantastic, Chris. I am absolutely fantastic. It's wonderful to be chained to the office in Cincinnati while you're out in lovely Lake Michigan, as is your right, enjoying yourself and probably, drinking copious quantities of alcohol and beautiful food and being, well, somebody looks after the ranch.
All the above is true. All the above is true. I'm on Crystal Lake, and we just had a heck of a thunderstorm come blow through here. This is, Tuesday morning. And we are on the brink. I've been sitting at home and in the office doing tapes on the Cowboys and the Rams and the Bears and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers getting ready for the football season. But now I have 3 days with Dr. Steve and Penny Pomerantz and my wife, Holly, up here at Crystal Lake. But the podcast goes on, baby. So we are going to roll on with this thing. But I get so many questions all the time about PFF, and some people have heard of you, some people had not heard of you, they didn't know the story. I had Fred Godelli, our producer at NBC, ask me one time, when did PFF become the Bible for everything related to football? And I said, well, I don't know if it's quite that, but it did start in 2006. Is that right? Do I have the date right on that?
It's difficult to put a date on it because when does anything start? Does it start when you come up with an idea for doing something? Does it start when you're just noodling things on a pad? Does it start when you move something to a PC? Does it start when you put a website live? Does it start when you incorporate a business? Does it start when you start paying people? Does it start when you start getting money in? It's difficult, Chris, because when you start something as a hobby, the official start date is just a difficult thing to run with. I run with 2009, which is a lot later than we started doing things, but that was the day we incorporated a company in the UK to actually, just allow us to run it a little bit as a business and to pay people and things of that sort of nature. But I guess the idea really started in 2005, 2006, and then just built from there, slowly but surely.
So when was it? My understanding of it was at some point you watched a Miami Dolphins football game, became a bit intrigued with some of the statistics and the data and the various things that were on the screen that may not necessarily have been on the screen for a soccer match or a rugby match or something. When was that football game that kind of, gave you the idea for the company?
I'm going to say something now, and hopefully somebody will tell me it's not true because this never happened. And that would be great because I've been trying to track it down. But in 1980, right at the end of 1982, in the strike-shortened season, a new TV channel called Channel 4 started showing football in the UK. I didn't see it then, but I saw it in 1983 and started watching it fairly religiously. My belief is that towards the end of that season, the Miami Dolphins played the San Francisco 49ers, Marino against Montana. And it's a game that not a lot of people remember, but it was a game that the Dolphins won in Candlestick. And it was really, in my estimation, everybody was saying Marino was pretty good at that stage, but it was the game that really legitimized them beating the 49ers in Candlestick, with Marino playing quarterback against Montana was a statement game. And I would like to say that was the game that I watched, but I'm waiting for people to come back and say, no, that game was never broadcast on, on Channel 4. But I think it was, but it may not be. It's one of those interesting things. What I do know for certain is when I really got into it was in 1984. And in December 1984, I was at Liverpool University in those days studying physics. It was my first or second year of college, can't remember which. And I was on my way back, and I was on Liverpool Lime Street Station, traveling back to my home in Cumbria, in the Lake District. And I picked up a copy of a magazine called Touchdown, First Down. And it had a picture of Dan Marino on the front, and inside was all the statistics, all the box score statistics that we all disparage so much these days. But to me, in those days, it was just utterly fantastic. And I read that thing from cover to cover. I've still got a copy of it. I've still got the actual magazine now. And that was probably the thing that really got me started, that magazine together with watching the games. And then a little bit later, the problem with watching highlights is, and when it's cut down to about 35 minutes worth of highlights, you get to the stage where when they start to show you a highlight, you know what's coming next. And when they're showing, they've picked one specific game that they're going to show you, that game is going to go down to the last minute because they're going to show you something that's exciting. But by the fact that it's highlights and the fact that they know you're showing you a game, it's not really as exciting as what it might be if you're watching it live. So I started listening to Armed Forces Radio Network, which was difficult in itself because you would try and listen. It would be 6 o'clock till midnight on a Sunday night for the first two games. And the reception was incredibly poor, but funnily enough, I found that more fun than watching the highlights because at least you didn't know what was happening.
The sense of intrigue. I got, what is one of the most interesting parts of your story for me is the fact that you were a business consultant. You really were not part of the sports industry. You were not part of anything. My understanding is that you sort of brought companies together, and through tech, you eliminated some jobs and ended up being the reason multiple people got fired, and it kind of took its toll on you a bit.
That's fair. It's one of the main reasons I set up my own company was because you get sick of corporate. Corporate, by its very nature, is a difficult animal. And when you've been in corporate for a long period of time, you don't want anything more to do with corporate if you can avoid it. Or I didn't anyway. So I started my own company. But the problem with that was you start your own company, and then after a period of time, you realize you're still working for corporate. That's what you're still doing. They are still the master that you're working for. And we would start doing things that I thought were the right things to do. I thought were good for the business. You would advise them, then you would bring in people to, you would project manage that piece of work through to conclusion, and you'd be proud of it. But then other people would come in, and for reasons that were not as business or were not as important to the business, but more personal problems, personal issues with the business, people would try and do similar things. And you ended up making people redundant who, in my opinion, didn't need to be made redundant. There weren't good business reasons or good rationales for doing it. And at the end of the day, just wore on me. And I didn't start PFF necessarily to get away from that. I thought that was probably the lot for the last, I was 45 at the time. for the last 20 years of my working career, that was probably going to be my lot. And that was probably what I was going to do. So I just needed a hobby that I could, almost lose myself in, the equivalent of the old man shed in the UK, the shed that you go down to and you lose yourself at the end of a day. So PFF was the equivalent of my shed. And I would go to that to try and, get away from some of the decisions that, were being made, not necessarily by me, but by other corporate people that I didn't necessarily feel comfortable with.
So let's get into the football part of this for a little while. I mean, you literally went from I've never seen a football game to a person that is intricately involved in decision making, in data, in analytics, as anybody there is in the world in the National Football League and college football. All 32 teams are customers of ours. Over 100 college teams, or 100 college teams, if I remember the number exactly, are involved with us. So how does a guy go from, this is the first football game I've ever seen in my life, and I'm living in England, not exactly the hotbed of American football, to that story I just told?
Yeah, I think you do me a little bit of you maybe exaggerate a little bit, because it's like a lot of things. I'm fundamentally, I'm a business person really, who knows a bit about football and who has, worked with you and the rest of the team and people far, far more talented than me to build an organization that does that. I don't do that. I try and help to bring together those people to do those things. The people that work for us now are just phenomenal. I still remember, I don't know whether you can remember this, Chris, that I wasn't always the CEO of the business. We ran it in two parts, and you were looking after things, and we had two people, and we decided that we were going to combine it. And you told me that you would like me to run the business on one proviso, that I stopped doing football related things. And I still remember that the big issue with that was the fact that I was providing the pre-game work for Fred Godelli for NBC. He would get, I would spend the whole of Monday doing a presentation for him on the coming game. And Fred was very happy with it and everything was good. And then obviously there was a nervousness when you said that you didn't want me to do that anymore as to who was going to do it. And there was a nervousness from Fred. And I still remember that when he got the presentation that George Shahuri then did, when George took over from me, it wasn't so much that Fred was concerned about the fact that George was taking over. It was why he'd had to put up with this dog shit for 2 years. Now he was getting proper, real high quality stuff. And that's really what it's about. It's about providing ideas that people far more talented than me can then move on from and do. They always say, not that I'm comparing myself to the chairman of Boeing, but the chairman of Boeing doesn't know how to build planes. They have a ton of really talented people who can build those planes, people who know a lot more about football, they've forgotten more about football than I'll ever know, and as in terms of what we're doing as a business now, Chris, we're branching out into rugby, we're branching out into soccer. People ask me football related questions all the time now. And I go, I don't think I'm the right person. I know a person who can answer that question for you, but I feel a bit of a fraud answering football related questions because I just don't go into it in the detail that I used to do, because now I'm managing a business for you.
It's unbelievable. So basically the story was that NBC wanted me to do a post-game show. And I said, okay, sure, but I don't watch much football on Sunday. I'm getting ready for my game. And they go, it's no big deal. You can just make it up. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I just make up stuff. They're going to pay me more money. Yeah, what the heck? I'll just fake it. And I said, well, surely somebody online has some recap of what happened during the day so I can read the articles and sort of fake my way through it. Yeah, I've got the television on while I'm studying, but I'm still getting ready for Sunday night on Sunday afternoon. And so I started going through, I found Pro Football Focus, and I'm looking at this stuff and I go, hey, this is pretty good. I don't know who this is, but then you could pay $26.99. I'll never forget that number, $26.99. And you could, so I put in my credit card and it allowed you to go to some back page and more information and more detail. And I had just done several of these teams, during the course of the season. So I really knew them. I knew what I thought of the players. I knew what the coaches thought of the players. And I had actually watched them play in multiple games, getting ready for those games. And so I'm like, wow, this stuff is really pretty good. I mean, they've got this pretty much nailed. And so I type in the contact us at the top right-hand corner of the screen, which no ordinary human being ever types anything in contact us, but I did. And I go, hey, this is Chris Collinsworth. Love your stuff. Who are you guys? Just assuming it was a bunch of former players or coaches or whatever. And I put my telephone number in there. I'm going to say a maximum of 5 minutes, probably more like 3 minutes. I get a call from this guy who I'm looking at right now with a British accent, and he starts, and I can't do British accents, so I won't do it injustice there. But he says, oh, and Neil Hornsby, and and I go, all I'm thinking is, I swear to you, all I'm thinking, as soon as I heard the British accent, is son of a bitch. This Brit just hustled me out of $26.99. I was so mad. I couldn't stand it. All I'm thinking about is how am I going to get my money back? So I am now going, I'm going to fix this. I'm started firing questions at you. I mean, inside linebackers, safeties, centers, offensive linemen, anything I could think of just to throw you off. After about 5 minutes, I just stopped and I went, this sucker knows more about football than I do. I don't know how. And I remember the one question that I've probably asked you 4 times on that phone call, which is, who are you? Who are you with this British accent that knows so much about football? And within, you tell me, I don't know how much longer after that, we had a very long conversation at that point, and we had multiple long conversations much later. And within a month or two, something like that, I had bought the majority share of the company. You were on your way to Cincinnati, Ohio to run that company. And it was just an amazing streak. Now, my wife, Holly, almost never spoke to me ever again because I really didn't include her as much as I should have in the decision to buy the company. But it was a game changer of a moment for me and for you as well, because then you were on the plane with your family going to Cincinnati, Ohio.
It was definitely a whirlwind. It was about 10 days after we first started talking that you made an offer to buy the company. It was 10 weeks, pretty much to the day that the deal was signed, and the family were on the way across. And those 10 weeks don't feel like a lot, but I can remember when lawyers get involved, Chris.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we know a little bit about lawyers now, don't we?
We know a little bit about lawyers. And when lawyers get involved, things start to aren't quite as fun as they were previously. And there were times then, I still remember my family were coming across, and I tell Claire everything. One of the few things I didn't tell her was it felt like from about Friday before they were coming across, I think they were coming on the Thursday, to about Wednesday, we genuinely feel the deal was off for one reason or another, and because lawyers got involved. And I remember being at your house you just got back from church, and I turned up at your house and we had a long emotional conversation about the whole thing. And you said you were going to get some more lawyers involved. And those lawyers eventually on, I think it was probably the Wednesday, told you that you were good to go. And my family were pretty much in the air at that stage. And I was absolutely dreading, my wife and my two sons landing and telling them, not quite what we expected.
There's a return flight tomorrow, honey. We can get on it. Don't worry about it. There's been some bad times, but that with PFF, but that was about as nerve-wracking as it got. And as I said, I didn't tell her, so I was just and when you keep things to yourself and you don't tell people, particularly people you trust who are normally the people that you vent to or let things go to, and you're not telling those. Hey, I was wound up tighter than I think I've ever been, because I just felt I was letting so many people down. I felt I was letting them down. I felt I was letting all the other guys down. Anyway, luckily it all came to pass. I still remember there was a guy called Joe Sharrock who had done some work for us. He hadn't done a lot, but we were trying to track him down to get the deal finished because he was one of the shareholders, and we'd been giving out sweat equity at the time because it was just the only way we could do this thing. We couldn't find this guy. He dropped off the face of the earth, and we needed him to finalize the deal as well. And eventually it was Holly, your wife, that tracked him down somewhere in Buffalo. And the poor guy had been involved in an automobile accident. He'd lost the use temporarily of his arms and his legs, but for a long period of time. And I caught him just coming out of physiotherapy, and he took the call. And it was one of the nicest calls that I've had to make, where I told him just how much money he was going to get out of the deal. And that was going to pay a lot of, if not all of his medical expenses that he was worried about how he was going to be able to pay. And I still remember having that conversation now in Cincinnati airport, just waiting for my family to arrive. So that was one of the nicer things that happened off the back end of the deal. There are so many things. The one thing I remember, one of my reasons for wanting to buy the company, or one of the opportunities I thought we would have too, really. I thought gambling at some point would come down the road. I thought fantasy football would be a big part of it. And both of those things are kind of happening right now. But probably my biggest one was, if we could do college football, I knew that would be more valuable to NFL teams. And it ends up that's exactly been the case, that it's been the more valuable asset for us as we've done it. And I think at the time that I bought the majority share of the company, it was you guys had 50 employees, 40 employees, something like that.
There wasn't that many full-time employees, Chris. That was a lot of part-time. So that included part-timers.
Oh, so we probably had 6 employees, but anyway,
it was probably more like about 15. But when we added the part-timers in, it was probably about 50. To your point, yeah.
So I remember, and I asked you, I said, okay, if we wanted to do college football, which would be 4 or 5 times the number of games as the NFL, if we wanted to do college football, how many people would we have to add on? And you, and as only you could do it, said, none. We can do it. My guys will do it. Now, we're all the way back to the slave driver conversation you were having at the beginning, because I'm sure you did go back and tell these guys that were working 24 hours a day anyway, that now they had to do college football. And now I understand what a remarkable achievement that was in that first year, that these poor guys, and we made it to the Super Bowl. Is that right? Did they get it done before the Super Bowl, the entirety of college football? I have never seen human beings be asked to do so much work in my life. So those, let's call it 50 people that were in charge of it now we have 600 people doing the same job, something like that. A Herculean effort to get us jump started with college football.
Yeah, it'll be more like about 850 this year, I think, when we start, Chris. But yeah, to your point, that month, that January month, still is legendary in PFF. It goes down as hell. It was called Hell Month, and it will always be. So January 2015 was Hell Month, and it was just people working like, you know. Luckily, we don't have to do anything like that anymore. But yeah, we went from the big thing, and the point that you make is the crucial one. College football was so important to the growth of PFF. You just can't understate it. So that was your big play. Can you do this? We'd talked about it for a while, but we'd never really had the impetus to do it. You provided the impetus to move that forward. And then we've just gone to our 100th FBS client just last week. We just picked up our 100th FBS client, and we started with our first FBS client on March 2015. And now we're at our 100th FBS client. We've got all bar 2 of the Power 5. Yeah, 100 and moving smoothly on. And we're now doing, as you know, Chris, so this is going to be the first year that we're going to do all of the FCS as well. So we're doubling that number of games and moving on. But there will not be a hell month.
Well, you never know. This past month is kind of falling into that category for me, but regardless. It's hard to explain that to somebody as I sit in front of Crystal Lake here, though.
Yeah,
we have there's so many exciting things, but one of the things that I love are some of the stories of you guys. Basically, you were on the internet with your buddies. These are the early days of the internet. It was a hobby. It was a club. It was a place, a chat room for you guys to go and talk about football. And people that you would know from PFF, Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson, you can go down the line with who all was on that original crew that are still a part of this group. But the early days of that club were pretty crazy, right? I mean, you were throwing Sam Monson in and out of the club. It was like if people getting suspended, it was nuts.
Sam, for those people who follow Sam on Twitter, he's mellowed a little bit, but not entirely that much. And to say he could be a bit of a dick back in the day might be an understatement. You don't know who he is. He's just this guy. So it was sort of like an invite-only club, and he got banned from it. So, but give Sam credit, he came back under a guise of somebody else. Made up a whole new persona, cleaned up his act a little bit and came back under the guise, and then came back in as somebody else. So got invited got invited again. Steve came later, much later on in the process. Steve was a product of us starting to charge money for things, and Steve was so aggravated by the fact that he was going to have to pay money for something that he wanted for free, because why shouldn't he get it for free? That he thought, well, maybe the best way to do this is to get involved, and they'll give it to me for free if I actually do the work.
It's basically the same way we motivate Steve today.
Yeah, absolutely. I just spoke to Steve, actually. He's just on his way home, his way back to Cincinnati from Boston, and I heard all of the 4 boys in the car going on in the background. So, enjoy your 14-hour journey back to Cincinnati, Steve, with the 4 boys.
That's awesome. So it's been such a great adventure. It really has been. And as you look at it now, I mean, clearly we have more mathematicians working at PFF now than, who would have ever thought of that could have happened? But the one other part of the story that I've always found intriguing was the very first day that you got a call from the National Football League. And I'll let you tell that story, and I'm going to tell my version at the end of it, how it impacted me on a trip much later.
Okay. So it's 2009, and we have set ourselves a target of trying to do every game in the NFL before the next game starts. And we're trying to get to the bye week, because at that stage, when you've got a bye week, one or two less games mean a lot when you've only got a few people. Not everybody's working two jobs, but the majority of us are working two jobs. So we go on and we're doing a 50, 60 hour week, and then we're coming home and then we're doing this in our spare time. So to try and chunk this through was difficult. We'd literally got to the third week and we just about made it, and we were spent. We were absolutely, 100+ hour weeks for everybody. It was just, and for not, because why were we doing this? We weren't doing this for money. We were doing this for love, you've got to be a little bit crazy to work that amount of hours with nothing other than love of the game for the reason for doing it. So we get to that time, and the email that I got one morning could not have come at a better time. So I woke up, as I do, early, and I went and I read my emails, and there was an email from somebody purporting to be from the New York Giants. And I say purporting to be because it was in the old days where you put a contact us card on, and you didn't give them an email, you just sent them through a portal so that you didn't get spam, etc. So people could put whatever email on they wanted. And it said, hello, my name's John Berger. I'm the director of football analytics for the New York Giants. We've seen some of your stuff online, and we'd love to, I'd love to talk to you. Very similar to you. Now, I'm thinking bullshit for a number of reasons. Number one, what the hell would the New York Giants be wanting with me? Number two, I'm looking at the stats for the website, and we've literally got about 15 people looking at the website a day, and most of those are probably our own team. So, there's 5 people. What's the chances that somebody from the New York Giants would be looking at our website? So I'm thinking this is like one of my mates from the gym, and it's, they're basically, having a rip on me. And then I think, I look through, and you do the internet thing, and there is a John Berger from the New York Giants, and it all thinks it's a bit sophisticated for my mates, as a ruse. So I'm thinking, so eventually I go through to Claire, who's still in bed, and I go, Claire, I've got this email from the New York Giants, but it's probably not from the New York Giants, but it's from the New York Giants, but it's probably not. And she goes, well, it could be. Why don't you give them a call and find out? And that was the other thing I was thinking. Why on earth do the New York Giants want me to call them? Why wouldn't they call me? But anyway, I give him a call. It is John Berger. He is keen on getting some more information to do with player participation back in the day. And it was back, everybody now gets player participation at the end of the game from NGS and a whole host of reasons. But back then it was embargoed. Player participation was embargoed until the end of the season, until you were out of the playoffs. You only got your own player participation. So that was what he wanted. And he kept on saying to me, though, where are you getting the all-22 footage? And I'm going, we're doing this from broadcast, John. And he said, no. You can tell me the truth. I won't tell anybody where you're getting the all-22 footage from. Just tell me where you're getting the all-22 footage from. I said, I swear we're doing this off broadcast. He said, well, you guys are remarkable. And I still remember him saying, he said, because you're more accurate off broadcast than my interns are with the all-22 footage. And that was one of the times that I knew that we were maybe doing something that was a little bit different. It was just maybe our passion and our madness were driving us beyond the point of what was reasonable for a normal human being.
And so he wanted your data. And how much money did you charge him for that data for your club?
Oh, nothing. John has always driven a hard bargain. The first club to actually pay us any money at all, and I still remember because I've got the checkup on the wall. I'd love to keep the checkup on the wall, but we needed the $1,400 that we got from the Chicago Bears, right? So I've got a facsimile of the checkup on the wall. That was the first we got for some player participation, $1,400 from the Chicago Bears.
Wow. I never heard that part. I didn't know that part of the story.
For anything for ages. John drove a hard bargain.
Oh my gosh. So I don't even know what year this is. I'm terrible. Al Michaels can do the years all the time. But I'm driving to Indianapolis and we're doing the
2012, Chris.
2012. So 2012, and it's the New England Patriots and it's the New York Giants, and they're playing in Indianapolis, which is great for me because I'm in Cincinnati. So I'm just going to get in the car with my wife, Holly, and we're going to drive 2 hours to Indianapolis. So as she will do from time to time, if I'm driving, she'll take newspapers or articles and read to me as we're going up. So not the radio, but, she just will read stuff to me. So we had the Wall Street Journal and she's reading me. She goes, "Oh, you'll find this interesting." And it's the headline is, give me the headline, something about secret weapon or what?
Giants go long for number cruncher, an article written by Reed Albergotti, and I will always be grateful to Reed Albergotti. He's super.
So here it is, 2012. And my wife is reading me this article about this crazy Brit who started some data club, and the New York Giants are now calling him the secret weapon on their run to the Super Bowl, that this data analytics and has just made a difference for them and it's helped take them to the Super Bowl. And so she reads the entire article and it's very interesting and it was well done. And she said, you should bring this up during the game. And I said, "Are you out of your mind?" I probably didn't say it like that because that wouldn't be good. I probably said something like, "I don't think so. I don't think I'm bringing this up in front of 100 million people, this crazy Brit who does a club over in England. And no, I'm not, there's no way that's happening." So now circle back, whatever it was, 2 or 3 years later, and I'm on the phone with Neil Hornsby, and none of this is connected with me at all. None of it. I didn't put it together at all in my mind. And then you had sort of a scrapbook of some kind that had PFF stuff in it. And it was probably part of a presentation that we made to somebody or whatever. And I remember seeing that article for the first time, because I really had just heard it read to me from Holly. And I went, "Oh my God, I cannot believe that 3 years ago, Holly's reading me this article as we're driving to Indianapolis to call the Super Bowl, that you as the secret weapon helped them win and knock off the Patriots in this game. And then here we are on the phone with this crazy conversation and a business relationship." It is serendipity at its finest right there, but it has been an absolute blast. It's kind of been reduced. We've had a lot of people in on meetings over the years. We've had a lot of conference room debates and arguments, and we've had 20 people in a room together, but not really anymore. Now it's kind of you and me, and we go slug it out between the two of us. A puff of smoke comes up. Eventually we come to some decision. But to have the number of people now that we're responsible for, and you really think about it. I mean, I was thinking the other day, I want to put a sign up in our new PFF offices in Cincinnati that says something along the lines, "What you do today is going to impact thousands of people all over the world." And it's absolutely the truth, not just our employees and their families, but all of our team's employees and their families. And now as we take it out to soccer and to rugby, and we've got people that work literally in probably 7 or 8 different time zones around the world, what you do today is going to impact people all over the world. And it's amazing that it all started from your little hobby and club of people that have taken it to this level?
It's, I put it down to, I think, when people ask me about starting businesses and various bits and pieces, I said, as long as the key guiding principle is doing the best job you can possibly do, then, and don't worry about money, then you've got a much better chance of success. And I think we're incredibly lucky in the fact that this was never about, certainly in the early days, and even really now, I mean, when we had COVID, there would have been a really good opportunity for you, Chris, to say, oh, let's slash our costs and do things. We didn't have the year we expected last year. We had a very, very good one, but we didn't have the year we expected. And it would have been very easy for you to say, well, let's slash some costs and make the money that we did. And there was never that thought. I mean, your view was, no, we're not doing that. We'll just make less money this year. When the driving force is always to do the best job possible, I think you have a much greater chance of success. I have a view, and this is back from the consultancy days, generally two sorts of people in business: people who do things for status and money, and people who do things for the challenge. And one of the biggest things that you can do, one of the best things you can do with inside your company or a company that you work for, is to try and maximize the number of the latter people and minimize the number of the former people. And that's what we've done at PFF. We have people who come to work every day for the challenge. And that's the standard that you've set in terms of what you're looking for from the people that we've got. And it's not about the money. It's not about anything other than there's a challenge here. What can we do to get better? And I think that fundamentally is at the root of, we've been moderately successful, I suppose. We've done reasonably well. And I think that would be at the root of it. And luckily, because it was never set up to make money to start with, that has, continued. And I just believe deep down that's, if we can continue with that, if we can continue looking at each day as a challenge, and the whole ethos of PFF is about encouraging people who come to us who love a challenge. You know the type of people we've got in this business, Chris. We've got unbelievable people, people that I'm just thrilled to work with on a daily basis because I learn so much from them. And that's about not necessarily caring about anything else other than what the next challenge is ahead.
What's so interesting is that forever this had been sort of a B2B business, that we would sell our products to teams and the networks and to different things. Now the consumer part of this business has really become just as big a part of the business. And this podcast, other podcasts, all the different things that we do on social media. Who would have ever believed that social media would basically become our advertising arm, our extension into communities to be able to put our stuff out there, and hopefully people will want more and sign up and be a part of the elite and edge and all of the different things that go with it. But it's so much fun to come to work and watch these 20-year-olds basically teaching us about the new ways of the world. I mean, teaching us about the social media and how do you connect and marketing and all the different things. I think the generational part of this business is probably what I enjoy the most, because some of the interns that we get that work at PFF now simply blow you away, because it's like me trying to learn how to use the remote on my television or something. It's like they grew up with all this stuff. They lived it from birth on their cell phones and their various ways of communicating, and TikTok and Twitter and all the craziness that goes with it. But there is as much value sort of on the young side of PFF as there is with the people that have been around here forever.
100%. When you talk about what are you looking for when you're looking for a person who works at PFF. Fundamentally, you're looking for a person who, number one, has all of your value set. Skills are incredibly useful, but you can take a person with 100% of your value set and 50, 60% of the skills, but you can't take a person with 100% of the skills you're looking for and 50% of your value set. That just won't work. What we're doing is we're getting people in who like and enjoy and espouse the PFF culture of what we do, which is it's about the grind. It's the usual thing. We don't believe in this business that, all of a sudden we're just going to take off and fly and, it's going to go like this. It's a grind, and you've got to come to work every day understanding, that what we do is about fundamentally trying to get a little bit better every day. And you need people with that mentality and that mindset. And those people teach us the skills that we don't have, and hopefully we can teach them some of the skills that they don't have. Some of the hardest skills of project management, the business analysis, the things that you need to do the job. And they teach us all about the social media, the new generation, the way that people communicate these days, to help us keep in contact with all of the fans, not just people your and my age, Chris. Otherwise, we
thank God. So we've had so many unbelievable partners in this business. We started with Jack Cassidy and Dave Calhoun, who's now running Boeing, who ran AC Nielsen, Dick Ebersol, Dr. Rob Height. So many different people that have been a part of our organization. I'm leaving people out, and I shouldn't. Steve Kreider, my buddy, a bunch of different people along the way. But probably my favorite is Chip Kelly, because Chip Kelly was the hardest sell I've ever done in my life. I was doing the Philadelphia Eagles game when he was coaching up there. I sat down in the room, and from the minute I sat down until I left, Chip Kelly wore my ass out about PFF, how we didn't know anything. We didn't know what we were talking about. How could you say this? How could they say this? I mean, just under siege, right? And I get that occasionally, not always based on what I say, but what our boys will say about somebody. I got it a little bit in Pittsburgh last year too. But so I said, I go, Chip, listen, I'm not going to argue with you. Your time's too valuable. We've got to go. I go, promise me this. Promise me at some point in the off season, you will come to Cincinnati, Ohio, and spend 3 or 4 hours coming up there and just let us put on a presentation. Rah, he's still growling. And he goes, I'll think about it. Sure enough, that off season, Chip, as a man of his word, came up and sat down with our guys. For the first hour of that meeting, all I could think is this was the dumbest idea I ever had, because he was giving to our guys exactly what he gave to me in that meeting. He's wearing them out. And finally it got down to, I was like, just let us show you what we do, how we do it, the process, the whole thing. Fine. All right. He's still growling. And so I leave them all alone, and they come back. And after about 3 or 4 hours in the room with all our guys, most of whom have never played football in their life, let's be fair, most of whom have not, Chip comes out of the room and he wants to invest in PFF. He said, I've never seen anything like that. He goes, I went in to teach these guys what to do, and they're teaching me stuff. And that connection, and what the endorsement of a Chip Kelly, who was a non-believer, who became a believer, and some of the conversations that he had with coaches in the NFL, coaches in college football, and how valuable that was, because there was a whole group of them out there that thought only football people, not a bunch of guys who are studying all the tape, or studying every single player on every single game. that those people's opinion or those people's work should be discounted. The mathematicians, don't listen to them. Don't listen to what they're saying about percentage plays of when to kick a field goal, when to punt, when to do all that stuff. It doesn't mean anything. I think that his endorsement with some key people in the NFL probably was as important as anything that happened to us.
It's really important, and we always do this. When people want to be critical, our first response is generally, let us explain in a little bit more detail. Come, let us talk to you, because I think there's a misunderstanding. Generally, 95% of the time that people have criticized us, it's because there is a misunderstanding of what they think we're trying to do and not what we're actually doing. And if we can broach that gap, then, we can be incredibly helpful to people. I know, I remember a time that Mike Shanahan got in contact with you and said, I've got this young kid, Bobby Sloik, think he would be good for your business. Bobby came on board. He learned what we were doing for a while, and then he began to help us. And then when Kyle Shanahan got the job in San Francisco, Bobby went to work with him, and he's now, I think he's going to be the passing coordinator for Kyle this year. And if you ask Bobby what value he got from PFF, I don't want to put words into his mouth, but I would suspect he would tell you, as he's told me on many occasions, he got tremendous value out of that. And it's helped him to get to the place in the NFL where he is. Now, clearly, the biggest thing that got him to where he is Bobby himself and all of his football knowledge and, the passion and what he's got. But it's certainly his time with PFF was a huge help to him personally in terms of looking at things through a slightly different lens, the way we look at things, than perhaps some people in football aren't. It's just another tool in the kit bag. I mean, what do you do in life, Chris, as you go through life? You put more and more tools in your kit bag. It's the old adage, isn't it? When all you've got's a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The more that you can put different tools in your kit bag as you go through life, the more that you can look at things differently or find different ways to assess a situation, the better it makes you at your job. And that's fundamentally what PFF's about, with the NFL teams. It's just giving them another lens, another tool to use to help them win football games. That's what it is.
Yeah, the George Shahuris, the Eric Egers of the world, who have come in as mathematicians. I mean, that's what they are, right? They're data analysts, they're mathematicians, and sometimes they come up with stuff that the first time you see it, you go, "Oh, that's bullshit." Come on, man, that's not real. And then you start to study it and you start to look at it, and all of a sudden there have been moments in the past 5 or 6 years for me where I truly begin to go, the entire time I've been playing football, I've been told one thing that's an hard and cold fact, and it's just not true. It's just not true. It just simply isn't the case. You can go through multiple different things. So much of it has to do with going for it on fourth down, when you should go for it, when you shouldn't, the value of offensive linemen versus running backs and where they should be drafted. At one time, running backs were considered to be the single most position in all of football. They were the superstars of the National Football League. And now you begin to study it and you begin to analyze it. They're the most vulnerable to injuries. They're probably the ones you shouldn't pay the second contracts to. Their draft stock is going lower, and it's become a fact. So, the value of what's more important, pass rush or coverage, and all the different mathematical sort of approaches to the game. Is there anything that sticks out to you as being the one thing that you went, damn, I just would have never believed that was coming out of my mouth?
it not really, but what I do remember is I can remember going back through time, and I had this view that an offensive lineman, it was far, far more important for an offensive lineman not to give up negative plays than it was for them to produce significantly good plays with big blocks, to help on running plays. So I thought avoiding the negative was more important than creating the positive. And funnily enough, just like in life, Chris, that proved not to be the case. One of the things that we learn is the more positive you become, the better it is. And that was exactly what the mathematics then told us when we went through. And I was shocked. But again, it was just fantastic that we were able to have the data to allow people to then do the math and tell us what statistically the answer is. And that's constantly what we're doing. My biggest skepticism of people are the people who are the most certain, the people who, absolutely 100%, this is the right way to do things. And I'm going, you sure? Because people who say things with that degree of certainty scare the living shit out of me, Chris. Everything in life comes to be honest, with a certain degree of, uncertainty. And what we do, it's about elements of risk. Everything's on a bell curve to some degree. Where does this fall on that bell curve? What's the chances of doing this? When you and I make business decisions, you're looking at what the risk is. You're looking at what the reward is. You're balancing a load of things. But the one thing that we never are is certain. And if we were certain, I've always said to you, if I was certain where we were going to end up in 5 years' time, I wouldn't do this job. Because it wouldn't be any fun. It wouldn't be fun if it was certain. What would be the fun in doing that? You're just going through rote then. So it's that level of uncertainty and learning new things all the time. And sometimes things going backwards and forwards. Eric and George did an excellent podcast on pass rush versus coverage again. And it's that element of, do you want to pick a pass rusher who you can pretty much guarantee, with a better degree of certainty is going to be a great player, than a cornerback who's going to go through much more fluctuations in their performance level? And all of those things are just really interesting to me as time goes on and we get more data, we incorporate more and different data into what we do, so that the level of certainty, I don't like the word certainty, but the level of likelihood increases in what we're suggesting. That whole journey is just fascinating to me, and will continue to be fascinating as we do it in rugby and as we do it in soccer as well. It's just the future is incredibly interesting in terms of what we're doing.
Yeah, it was interesting you brought up that podcast, because I called them as well, because the argument came down to, okay, a cornerback might be more valuable than a pass rusher, but because it's so much easier to avoid a single cornerback than it is a single pass rusher, you have to begin to look at the units, the coverage units, and the pass rush units, and there are fewer people usually in the pass rush units. I mean, you start into these conversations that you go, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going down this rabbit hole, but it's exactly what PFF is. We are one rabbit hole after another trying to unearth the answers, and we're not always right. That's the thing I try to tell people. We are not always right, but we are willing to argue, to fight it out, to slug it out, to debate it, to look at the data, to examine things, to turn it upside down and shake the globe a little bit, and try and figure out something that nobody really had ever thought of before. And I think that's the great passion of it, because now I get a lot of coaches and I get a lot of front office people who will come back to us and say, what do you guys think about this? Or can you do a study on that? Or can you, I don't want you to give this to the other teams, but can you do a one-off piece of work for us? Because we're trying to crack this code, what we're doing. And I think that's really been the great fun part for me, is that people are now opening the thought process of maybe I don't know this, or maybe what I've been taught since birth about football is not right, is just fundamentally not right. And maybe it took somebody from England, maybe it took a group of guys who thought it was a hobby, who didn't have all that built-in crap in their head that we've been doing it this way since the beginning of time, so obviously this is the right way to do it, to turn the whole football world upside down and shake it. And my friend, you've been shaking it pretty good for a while now.
Well, it's nice of you to say, Chris. At the end of the day, I don't look upon it as doing anything else than just trying to organize, and run a business that allows people with far better skills than me to do that type of thing. There's so many similarities between football and business, just in the way that, you run things and you try and do things. The big unknown in football, and the thing that we'd like to get through to more, I always look at it and say, when you're evaluating a draft prospect, what are the things you can do? You can look at the measurables, which is, height, weight, and things like that people have done for a while. Then you can do the one that we do, which is look at the production. What do they do on the field? There's some injury stuff that you can have some knowledge of. But the big intangible one is, what's that person like psychologically? What's their psychological makeup? Are they somebody who's skated through life, and then when they hit a barrier, they start to struggle? Are they a person that when they hit the next level at the NFL, they're going to implode once it gets a little bit trickier? What's their, how do they enjoy the grind? All of those sorts of things. The psychology of things is important. And that psychological makeup of a team is hugely important. You look at what we do and we talk about culture and what's the most important thing in a business. It's the culture of that business. Let's look at a particular team, the Cleveland Browns. So the Cleveland Browns have done everything right from a perspective of putting together a team, and they've pulled together. They've made good decision after good decision after good decision on their secondary, which was clearly their biggest, weakness last year. So they've pulled in Troy Hill. They've pulled in John Johnson. They're getting guys back from injury. Fundamentally, it looks great, but it's not going to matter until those guys get on the field, and how obviously the psychology and how they blend together as a unit really matters. And that's why I'm a little bit nervous about people being a little bit bullish on the Cleveland Browns, because it's about, a lot of that bullishness is based on what they've done on the secondary. But when you bring a bunch of guys together that have never played together, how's that going to work, Chris? We've seen the dream team stuff before. So sorry, long diatribe, but just coming back to, as a team or as a business, it's how people function together that matters almost as much as what the actual physical talent of those people is as well.
Yeah. And now as we move forward, one of the things that I'm excited about is the possibility of taking people who have kind of been excluded from the game a little bit. But I love the concept that at PFF at some point we can be a bit of the driving force behind teaching, learning, bringing people into the game that can then go on, like a Bobby Slowick, to have a career in the National Football League with some added information that they can pass along through PFF and the data and all that different stuff. So I'm hoping it's just the beginning. I hope that we get a chance to impact and change the world and bring people into the game that can be great and can be remembered for a long time. And it all started with a little club back in England in 2009, and here we go. Hopefully, it's just the beginning.
Well, I'm just enjoying the journey, Chris. Like a lot of things, the journey is the fun part. And we had a great day yesterday, as you probably saw. And hopefully we have a lot of great days ahead. And it's fun. Fundamentally, the job is fun. And, as long as this job remains fun, I want to do it. As I always say, people say, when will you stop doing this? And I say, well, Chris is going to have to take a crowbar to get me out of the business because it's just fun. What else? What other word can you put on it? Coming to work with a group of people that we've got, guys and girls that we're now getting into this business, so talented, so young, so enthusiastic. How can you be anything other than just massively enthused to work with people with such a passion for what they do and such a passion to drive forward and to move the thing in different directions as we go? That gets me up every single morning, just buzzing and ready to go, and long may it continue.
We will see you again next week. I don't know if next week is my fantasy football draft or not, but we're going to try and do one of those. I'm not very good at it. I'm going to drag your ass into it too, because I know at one time you hated fantasy football. We both love it now, though. We both love it now. But it's been fun. It's always fun to go back and tell a little bit of the amazing history of Neil Hornsby and the birth of PFF. Well, thanks to Neil, and thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of the history lesson of PFF. It has been an amazing ride for all of us here. Over 700 employees now. It's phenomenal. If you get a chance to subscribe to the podcast, give it a little 5-star review. That always helps our cause a lot to do more and more podcasts for you. And we'll see you next week with another great episode.